March of 2020, my students were asking if we were going to close school due to COVID. I said, no, it's not like we live in the snow belt. Then it was March 13th. Schools closed and the way we do school changed forever. On this show, we're going to talk about the ways in which schools and community have had to pivot and continue to pivot in a constantly changing reality. This is Pivot.
Welcome back to Pivot. This is your host for today. I'm Jagga Rent. So excited to have the guest that we have today. Before we get into the show, I do want to shout out the intro music you heard today was from my nephew, Salim. He is an aspiring music person, and he just helped us out with that beat. So we're happy to feature him on the show. But let's get right into what we're talking about today. We have three esteemed educators from HSC High School here. Gonna let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to tell you what we're talking about today. So why don't you go ahead and tell us who you are, how long you've been here, something cool about you.
All right. Well, my name is Greg Gastineau. This is my 15th year at Hamilton Southeastern, my 28th year overall. I was at Pike Township before that. I teach ACP government through IU. And just a little trivia, I used to be a mobile disc jockey back in the day.
Wow. Tell us what is your DJ name?
Oh, who's on the mic? Double G's on the mic, spinning and grinning. So if you guys have a wedding coming up, I'm your guy.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Janet Chandler, and I've been at Hamilton Southeastern for 42 years. I did not come with the building. It was already here. At least parts of it were.
That's not a 4 or 2. That's 42 together.
42, and then one other year in another location. Fun fact about me, I worked at the Olympics. I was the official scorer for the 96 Olympics, so I was a paid employee, so that's probably one of the coolest things I've ever done.
That is probably a little cooler than being on Pivot. We appreciate you gracing us with your presence. We have another guest. He's going to join us Bluetooth. This is our first time doing this Bluetooth and calling in. So, Mr. Follis, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jamie Follis. I teach AP World History, AP European History, and Comparative Religions, and I've been at HSE for 20 years. And a fun fact about myself is I have a side business where I sculpt, and I sculpt for movies and TV shows and Lucasfilm and things like that at special events.
So not quite the Olympics, but, we'll take
No,
it.
not quite. Yep.
Well, our listeners, we have a really cool and what we think will be an informative show for you today. And just to be honest, this originated, we were going to just put this out to our staff as an email with some bullet points, some informative suggestions. But after we had the conversation with the teachers, we decided as a Pivot team to bring this to the show. This conversation needs to come alive for teachers. We need to for them to be able to refer to this, maybe press pause and rewind and say some of these things that you guys are suggesting. The topic today is how to help teachers know what to say, what not to say, some general guidelines around the election. We know next week, and here in where we are, next week will be the election on Tuesday. Kids will have already been talking about this, and teachers have already been talking about this. The day after the election and succeeding days, we might have some scenarios and an environment that we're not used to. We want teachers to be prepared for that. We don't want them to be on any court stands or in trouble, so we're just going to try to help them out. And some of the things that we talked about yesterday, I just want to relive that for our listeners today. So let's jump right in with some general selections. We'll start wide and come narrow. Janet, you said something yesterday when we were talking just about how most everything can be turned political. A lot of the social issues that we're seeing today can be turned political. Why don't you talk specifically about what some of those issues are and help teachers navigate through that?
Well, in one of my positions, of course, I get to deal with a lot of issues that maybe the rank and file teachers don't get to deal with. And so I've already dealt with this year issues regarding Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ issues. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, can you display a flag behind you on your virtual self here, indicating a support for one of those items? And so the answer to that is yes, until someone tells you that you can't.
Mm-hmm.
So your employer controls your speech, and that is those items that signify Black Lives Matter or LGBTQ or the pride flag. That's symbolic speech.
Mm-hmm.
And as a teacher, we're government employees, and we're controlled by our employer at the work site for speech.
Yeah. So I think what you said yesterday was what really stuck in my head was it's protected speech until it's protected.
Until it's not protected.
Until it's not protected.
Right.
So I think that's just something for people to remember, and you may not know. Greg or Jamie, you have anything to add on that?
Well, I think it's important, as the courts like to say, as you enter the schoolhouse gate or as you walk into your classroom, you lose your First Amendment rights to free speech and religion in some capacities. And so you have to really be cognizant of that fact, and that, we have an outstanding administrative team, and Ms. Chandler will do everything she can to defend us, but you've got to be smart in the world we live in with parents, listening to the Zooms, recording the Zooms.
Yeah.
Right. And our society is so toxic. Mm-hmm. And we've been here before. 1968 was extremely toxic, right? If we go back in history, you go back to Rutherford B. Hayes with his election in the Electoral College.
1876. We all weren't alive at that time.
Yes.
Just in case you were.
But I think we have to be very conscious of the after effect of this election, that we're probably not going to know who's the winner for several weeks. This is going to be a lot like 2000 with Al Gore and George Bush going through the courts. The ballots are going to take a long time. The mail-in ballots, which I think we're, Janet, 60, 70 million people have already voted early in America. And so these are going to be, tough times. We're going to have both sides with all the anger that's going on in America.
Yeah.
So just please be careful and just think about your students' mental health. What would you want your child to hear? Is it 7 periods of the election? Or would you want your child learning about math, science? I mean, social studies, we sort of have an edict from the government. We have to talk about the election, right? That's a state law. But I think the students can get too much. And it'd be just overwhelming. And plus, they carry it everywhere they go on their device, right?
Jamie, you got anything to add there?
No, I think Janet kind of said it well. Like, I get brought into a lot of schools to talk about religion in the classroom, what you can and can't do, which gets into First Amendment stuff. And one thing that I always kind of remind people is like the courts have decided that when you're fulfilling your job as a teacher, you don't have all the rights you would have as an individual citizen. And I like to point out to people that, when the bell rings, that's not your time, that's the taxpayer's time. This isn't my wall, this isn't my desk. I use them, but they're the taxpayer's things. And so when I'm fulfilling my job as a teacher, I cannot use that time to promote an idea religiously or politically, because I'm fulfilling my job as a teacher, not being paid to share my opinion on those matters. So it's best, if you're not trained in those areas, to just try to steer clear of them if you can, I think, because they are very volatile, and it's very tricky to teach them in a kind of uniform, fair, and equal way.
And then one thing I'd like to add is that sometimes it causes confusion because our speech is bought by the government, but the student's speech isn't. So students have actually greater free speech rights in this area within school than what adults do, what teachers or other employees do.
Well, let's stay right there, and I'm going to be devil's advocate for a little while. So this election comes up once every 4 years. This particular election has come with some great contention. There's also some things going on in society, race-related, that this time is just a little different. You're going to have kids who want to use that right that they have to speak, and we're not always going to be able to steer clear, Jamie. And I understand what you're saying of that, but if you have a biology teacher who not necessarily has the governmental or the social studies edict from the government to teach it, but it's come up in their class. Let's be real. This is a big deal. We got kids who are interested. They're getting things fed from them at home, on their phones, social media. It's not as easy to just steer clear of it as we might think. Jen, I want you to talk a little bit about how you can, as a teacher that might not be social studies, if this comes up in your classroom, how can you create scenarios or create an environment where you're not overstepping the line?
Well, I think it always begins with respect. This culture doesn't start the day of election or
That's right.
the day after election day. You already have to be a classroom teacher that creates a culture of respect where we listen to others' opinions and we can respectfully disagree with those opinions. We don't all have to agree. But at the end of the day, somebody is going to win an election, and there are going to be people who are going to be upset about it. And so I would always, I guess, for me, it's obviously easy. I taught English 1 year, and I've taught French for a number of years.
I was going to say, that's not the only language you
No,
taught.
no. But I think what you would do is, certainly like during passing period, if the conversation is appropriate, you let that happen. When the bell begins, you could say something like, well, maybe it looks like we're going to be waiting for results for a few weeks, or, we don't know yet, there's lots of races. I know we focus on the presidential race, but you've also got kids that are going to be friends of school board candidates that are running. There's going to be, all of that. And so I think you have to acknowledge it. I think if you don't acknowledge it, you're not really a human being.
Right.
Yes, the election did happen. Yes, we're still waiting, or, yes, there's always going to be winners and losers, in an election. That's why you have it. And, maybe a conversation in some classes could be like, what kind of, money was spent in the election. Like a math class might want to look at that.
Right.
I'm sure we could feed a lot of people in this country if we just took the negative commercials, the cost of them, to be able to do that. So I think you're always kind of looking for a hook with your subject, to try to make connections.
Yeah. Somebody else jump in on that.
Well, I think Janet's point on as usual, right? I mean, if I'm teaching a math class, I'm going to talk about the Electoral College and the math that gets there, or how polling numbers, right? You look at 2016, it's repeating itself, the fact that, Hillary Clinton had a huge lead in the polls, but then it shrank right before, and we're seeing the very same thing. So you talk about margin of error, how that margin of error of 3 or 4% can change an election. Or in English, you talk about the emotionally charged words in the commercials and study that, so you can sort of deflect the conversation from a political dispute, as Janet said, winners and losers, and say, well, let's get deeper into this, right? Let's look at a Victoria Sparks ad with her driving the tractor. What's the imagery here?
Yeah.
Right? Even art. And there's a lot of subjects that could get into this, but you sort of turned it into your curriculum. So if a parent's like, well, why is an art teacher talking about this? Well, we're talking about the images here, right? The colors, the themes, right? Like, oh, I never thought about that. And so I think it'd be an awesome way, with all our, the music, you could talk about the type of music they use in these commercials, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a teacher, I'm a little safer saying, well, we just talked about the election from my lens of my classroom.
Sure. Jamie, got anything?
I think like the kids are going to say, like, I start class with current events, and the kids are going to say things. I think the key is just when you cover it, to make sure you cover it in a way where even if a kid says it one way, you can give the other side. Like just today, a kid asked me, why is no one covering the Hunter Biden emails? So I tried to explain what some people might say, and then I tried to explain what the other side would say. And I gave both sides equal time and equal validity, and no kid would have an idea as to how I felt.
Jamie.
So if you're going to, yeah.
Yeah, I hate to cut you off. I want you to talk about, sometimes in your religion courses, you'll be talking about a subject, and kids may not even know where you stand on it. How do you do that?
It's like an acquired skill. I think for years when I first made the class, I was so nervous. We're all taught never discuss religion and politics, and I'll often start class with like political current events and then segue into religion. I try to just do it in a way where I'm speaking about facts, not personal feelings. I'm not getting into who's right and who's wrong. I do this with politics. I'll say, some people feel this way on this issue and other people feel this way. And if a kid says one way, then I might ask the class, how might somebody else feel, to make sure I'm covering both sides. I'll ask the kids in the beginning when I first made the class, what religion do you think I am? And they said Buddhist and Hindu and Muslim, and they had no idea, which told me I was doing my job.
That's right.
By trying to cover it in a very neutral way. My daughter yesterday was asking about this, and I was explaining. She said, I was trying to explain the teacher's job is to teach their curriculum, not to necessarily teach their opinion. And I wouldn't want somebody using my money to teach you how I don't agree, so I shouldn't do the same thing with the opposite. And that's how I try to approach it is, I cover every religion equally and fairly, or that political issue. I try to give both sides of the issue. If the kid isn't, I give the opposite viewpoint, even if I don't agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
And if one kid gives it, I try to see if that other kid could give the counterpoint to make sure we're kind of covering both sides of the issue. And when they say things, I try to make sure that we can kind of work through that and think about it, kind of break it down a little bit more and kind of see, well, why do people feel that way? What's another way they might feel, to kind of cover the issues? Because I don't think it's about being right or wrong on these issues. It's a matter of opinion and point of view and experience. And we get into this idea of like, I'm right, you're wrong, we're the good guys, you're the bad guys, I get it, you don't. When in reality, it's just a different set of values and experiences that shape how we feel those ways on those issues.
With our last 120 seconds here, I want you guys to just go with me here for a minute. Would you agree that teachers sometimes think that they're giving a fair, unbiased presentation, and we fall short of that? Could you talk about some times where teachers might think that they're giving both sides, but they're doing it in a way that is leaning one way or the other? Have you seen that in your career?
Oh, I mean, I've done it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been teaching 28 years, and it's a process, right? I mean, we all make mistakes, and watching yourself on a Zoom sometimes, if you're not really careful and give both sides, you can get yourself caught, right? So I just find that if I write it out, I'm much more likely to cover both sides. But teaching government in the world we're in today, it's toxic.
I have more of a poker face, and so through my training and bargaining, I tend not to. I mean, I have the ability to reveal like what I think about an issue, but I tend to keep myself neutral. But what I have seen is that sometimes a teacher, by an eye roll or a tone of voice, or sarcasm, or say, well, isn't that ironic, or something like that, that would then lead a student to believe something that perhaps the teacher is not really trying to convey.
Yeah. Jamie, you said yesterday, you can cover two sides of it, but you give one side 10 minutes and the other side 2 minutes. You cover both sides.
It's like if you're arguing passionately about the side that you agree with because it makes so much sense. The way you're carrying yourself, even standing, or the kind of enthusiasm you have about this issue, then I want to be fair. So then you kind of maybe talk about the other thing, but your energy level changes, the kind of intensity that you had changes, and the kids can pretty much see through that. That one side was sold pretty passionately, and the other side was kind of just given lip service. And even if you were attempting to do it, you may not have done it, well enough that you didn't really disguise that issue, that it was fair or equitable.
Yeah. This is great, guys. We could actually talk about this for forever, but why don't we give everyone 20 seconds to end, just something to close us out. What are your final thoughts, your final recommendations as we come up on next week? As teachers will listen to this, we really want teachers to be able to replay this as we get up to the week. Be comfortable with some of the things that you've talked about. Give us something to leave us with here in maybe the last 5-10 seconds of the show.
Well, I will just say personally, when that green light's staring at me when I'm Zooming, the whole world's watching, and everything you say could be replayed on any news outlet, and it could just be 10 seconds of what you said, right? And so just be very cognizant of that fact. I think we have an outstanding teaching staff here. My kids go here. I love HSC. I just would want nothing to happen to our teachers.
And I would also go ahead, Jamie. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, you can wrap up because you'll be better at wrapping up probably. I would say I agree with Greg. I think it's very stressful for teachers right now, and everybody is caught up in this. And I just would be afraid that someone, by trying to have a real conversation with their kids, could let their emotions get the better of them, right? And say things because we're all just trying to vent and get this out. And then, like Greg said, they could be recording it. It could be misconstrued another way. And then I'd hate to see anything happen to any of my colleagues because my daughter's in 8th grade. She'll be here next year. I want to see this place well. I want to see us all kind of get through this and, make good choices. And then Janet can take us home.
And obviously, as I represent people who get in trouble every day over a wide variety of issues in the district, I don't need more work. So, help me out on that. But if you want a conversation with any of us, we would all be glad to help you out. We do have lots of experience teaching controversial issues. We teach them every day because that's our job. And so if you want to talk to us, and want to try to understand, want us to help you, we would be happy to do so.
Yeah. Appreciate
sure.
everybody's time. Thank you for listening. Just understand you're not in this alone. We are here to help you and support you. If you have anxiety going into next week, do exactly what Janet said. Come find someone. Listen to this podcast over and over. We will get through this together. Thank you again for listening to Pivot, and we will see you the next time.